Okay, so what we're going to be looking at tonight is the general process of building your families in Revit. Now, families is a bit of jargon. When you draw anything in Revit, if you were to look it up in help files, Revit calls it a family. So it calls it wall families, door families, window families. The reason they call them families is the idea that there's a file that they start with, and then you make different versions of that original, and they are all related. So for instance, if I put a wall into my project, Revit calls it a wall family. But now if I put in a door, I've got this original door that I loaded, and as you folks have probably seen already in Revit, when you've got any object and you click its edit type button, you can make a new copy of it. So here, if I want to make a 36 by 80 door, I can hit duplicate up there and make a new size for the door. So that's where the notion of families comes through here. So I've got my original single dash flush family, and then I can make as many different sizes as I need to on the fly. Now, a little bit of more jargon here. The tools that you folks see on the architecture tab, door, ceilings, floors, roofs, and I think there's, yeah, it's walls, floors, ceilings, roofs. Those are all objects that you can only make in a project. Now, things like doors, they get built in their own separate templates. Those are called component families. So component families start life outside of your project and then get loaded in. So once these things are loaded in, so this door family that you see here started off in its own template, was created to be a door, saved in a library, loaded into this template here, and now is stored in a template. So folks, when you make your own doors and windows, as you move on with the software, you will save those doors and windows in your own directory like we discussed. But once you load it into a project, you don't need the original files anymore. The Revit database completely stores those doors and windows and any other objects that you load in. If the original from your hard drive gets deleted, well, I can save out this door back to my hard drive from my project. So it's like AutoCAD in that respect. If you've got a block inside AutoCAD, you can W block that thing out so you've got it back on your hard drive again, the original block. So,
copy from one project file?
You absolutely can. So if I have another project open right now, I could simply Control-C copy that door and Control-V paste it into the other project. Looking at our notes here, so the third item on the top of the page there is in-place families. So you've got your system families, which are the basic building blocks of your projects. You've got the component families, 2D and 3D, which are loaded into your projects and used as needed. In-place families, we'll go over that in the advanced course. That is where you do in situ modeling of some one-off geometry like a custom fireplace or some other component of your project that is a standalone design item in your project. So let's get into the family building process here. So inserting families, we've talked about that, insert tab, and then load family. So another thing that you can do too is in the project browser when you expand families, if you go and you say go to the doors folder here, you can see there's that one door that's loaded into the project right now, this single flush door. And if I drag and drop one of these into the view, it activates the door command with this size of door being inserted. So here's the 34 by 80. Click, drag, drop and release, and it starts the door command and puts in a 34 by 80 door. Now this applies for any family that you see in this list. So if I go down to my walls and I expand to say this brick and metal stud, I drag and drop that into the view. I am now using that wall type. It's actually quite handy. I don't know about you folks, but sometimes I find it a little bit tiring to go into the wall tool, then go over to the properties palette, scroll up and down, and find the wall type I wanted. It's actually really slick to be able to go over here and just see it in a big long list, drag it into the view, and start using it. So let's just load up a door here just for fun. So when I go to Insert and then Load Family, so if I go to my Doors folder here and double click on it, I can load in, I'll load in a rolling door, so an industrial door like you'd see in the back of a warehouse. So as soon as I load that in, I'm going to see that door listed in the project browser. So there it is there. And now I can either expand it and drag and drop one of these sizes out, or now if I use the door tool, I will see that listed as a door that I can insert from the properties palette. And there it is. So you can either activate a tool and then go find that particular size you want from the properties palette, or just drag and drop it from the project browser. Now, if we are building something of our own, the process for that is as we shall now see. You can build a new family at any time. You can leave the project that you've got open, no issue there. But you go to the File menu and you hover over New. Don't click it, just hover over New. And then it'll populate this extra menu here, and we're going to choose Family. And then Revit will show you a list of all the different templates that are provided by the software. Templates to build pretty much anything, regardless of your discipline. So there's stuff here for architects and engineers. Now, a lot of these templates are actually doing the same things. You can see here there's a generic model, wall-based. This is really similar to the door and window templates, but we won't bother you folks with that. We're going to deal with that in the next course. Let's all go together here and start the window template. So just click on Window and hit Open. So this is a window template. There is not much to it. What you're seeing in the middle of the screen here is what's called the host wall. This is like a little prototypical piece of wall upon which you build the window. So the wall geometry here doesn't get loaded. Everything else that you build will be. So let's just go over the interface here. So if you look at the top of the screen here, you can see that the tabs that we normally see in the context of a project, they are not here. In their place we have the Create tab and any other ones that you see. Now the Create tab is where you're going to do the modeling when you build a family. Revit has a series of extremely basic modeling tools. So any of you who've used other programs like Vectorworks or Rhino, these modeling tools are extremely elementary compared to what those programs have. Now, for the purposes of building doors and cabinets and that sort of thing, they're fine. And we'll get into which one you would use for the kind of geometry that you need to build. So with windows and doors, we generally can build everything with extrusions. So we've got the template here. There's a little piece of wall. I'm going to double click the exterior elevation. Now, for some reason, can't see anything here, so I'm just going to right click and choose Zoom to Fit. Oh, that's weird. Okay. So I think you can choose ZX too. ZX would also zoom in. This is the exterior elevation. So here's our little piece of wall here, and this is the opening inside it. So if I switch to shading, you can really see what's going on there. So we're going to build our window within this opening. So let's look at the general concepts. So I'm going to skip over the should it be hosted by a wall, floor, roof, ceiling, or topple surface. And let's just go over the process of building a family. So you start with a template. So we've already started with the window template. Now, with these templates, you can actually change the category of object that this is. Now, we started with the window template, right? Up here on the ribbon, This button right here is called Family Category. And what this does, you wouldn't do this very often, but just so you know that you can do it, I could change this from being a window family to being a door family. Just go up and click doors and hit OK. So now what happens is that this would be considered a door family, and if I were to load it into my project, it would be a door. But we'll just leave it as a window family. So sometimes you start with one of the templates in the list because it's got some specific properties that are nice, and then you can switch it to a different category, but we'll go over that in the advanced course. Now, step 3. This is really important, so just take out your pen and put a little asterisk beside step 3, because putting these reference planes into your family is important. Now, when we talked about roofs, we mentioned these green dashed lines here, reference planes. So they're like an informal grid. But what they can also do in the context of a family is help create the order and the bones of our family. So here's what happens. You folks can see that there are dimensions here that have names on them. This is called a parametric dimension. It's a regular dimension that you would put in, and then you can name the dimension so that it becomes a parameter. So this height dimension has a parameter on it. It has a name. So when you load it into a project, that dimension will change the distance between those two reference planes that you see on the screen. And as that happens, you can see the opening is going to get bigger. And then our window frame and glass and everything else inside that opening will also get bigger. So the reference planes are moved around by the dimensions, and the reference planes will then move around everything else that we build inside it. So the new window or door that we build inside these reference planes will be moved by the reference planes. So reference planes are the most important feature, organizational feature of these families that you build. Now, subcategories, this is step 4 now. Subcategories are like adding an extra layer to your family. They're called subcategories. Now remember, Revit doesn't have layers, right? It has categories. So when you're in a project and you hit VV on your keyboard, Revit displays all of its own categories. You know, the wall category, the window category. Now you can't add any more major categories in Revit. So if you had a new kind of object that you're going to put in a building that was a widget, you could not add a widget folder to Revit. Revit's got its list of categories, and that's all there is to it. But, ladies and gentlemen, if you go to the Manage tab and you go over here to Object Styles, you can see a list of the main categories in this template. So you got the walls category there for that little sample piece of wall. And you have a Windows category, and you can see all of the subcategories underneath it. Now let's say that we wanted to put some trim around the window. Well, we would actually add a subcategory for trim. So what you do is you'd hit the new subcategory button at the bottom, go ahead and do it, and make sure that it's going to be part of the window. And I'd put trim into the blank up here, trim. Now what does this subcategory do? Well, it does two things. Number one, you can adjust its line weights independently of the rest of the window. So, let me just see which way my camera is pointing here. I point it right up at the screen there so you guys will be able to see it.
Sorry, how did you get that window?
This one here is Manage tab, Object Styles.
Okay.
Okay, so what we're going to show here is just a little talk about subcategories and why we make them. Now, when you build a window, so you got the wall's pretty thick, so this is a plan view. And then we've got the wall opening behind. And then we put in the window frame, and then we've got our sheets of glass here. Anybody got a complaint about the frame? Too light, too heavy? Anybody? You are all too damn easy to please. They're too light, damn it. Should be a little heavier. Now, what happens if I decide that I'm going to make the glass really heavy too? Same line weight, so a fairly thick line weight, like maybe 0.35 millimeters for my frame and my glass. Maybe makes the glass a bit heavy. So I'm just telling you this from my experience. I like to see a fairly heavy line weight for my frame, and then a slightly lighter line weight for the glass, just so it doesn't become too blobby in the window. So for my frame, I might have a line weight of, say, 3. And then for my glass, I might have a line weight of 2, because they're two lines that are fairly close together, the two sheets of glass, and they tend to read as a single line and quite heavy. So one of the reasons that we add these subcategories is so that we have control over the line weights over each part of the window. So, I thought I did trim. I didn't. Okay. So, we add the new subcategory for windows. We put in trim. So now when I add some geometry for the trim of the window, whoops, I can control its line weight separately from the glass and separately from the frame. Now some of you might go, well dude, that is overkill. But there's going to be one of you out there who's going to want that feature. And to have that sort of fine control of all the different parts of the windows is a good thing. So that's the reason, number one, that we have these subcategories. The other one is that once we've loaded these subcategories into a project, we can turn them on and off as well. So when you go to the visibility dialog box and you scroll down the windows and you expand it, you would see trim listed in there. So here I'm just going back to the project, and if I go to my visibility, VV, and I bomb down the windows, so here you can see that I can turn that trim category on and off if I need to, for whatever reason. Granted, you won't need to in 9 projects out of 10, maybe more, but it's still a feature. So here we've got our ability to turn those categories on and off, and then in our project we also have object styles, and here we can control the line weights of all of those different pieces independently. So if I'm unhappy with my frame line weights, I can move them up or down, and same goes with the glass. Holy mackerel, the glass is 4. That is too heavy. Well here, let me just show you. Put in a little piece of glass. These, you know what, once we've made our own window, you'll see how those numbers are bad. Okay, so we're back in the window family again. So step 4, we've talked about the subcategories. Step 5, adding dimensions. So just putting in a regular old dimension, and then, so here you just use the dimension command, same as always, but now we will come back to this dimension later and we will give it a label. So this means this dimension will have a name appear on it, and by virtue of that process, once loaded into a project, it will become a parameter when you go to this Windows Type Properties. Now, just talk about step 6 and 7 together here. There's some geometry that we build, maybe not so much in windows, but certainly in doors, where the 3D geometry, we want it to be hidden in certain views. So let's just take a door. So I'm just going to draw it here in 3D, so just a simple frame around the outside. And there's our door lead. So in 3D, when we render this door, we want to see it in the closed position. We don't want to see the opening through the door, we want to see the door closed. And if it's got some glass in it, we want to see the glass as well. But now when we go to see this thing in plan, we don't want to see anything other than the frame. The door that's going in this opening, we'll want to hide the 3D door in plan. Instead, we're going to show 2D graphics to show the door in the open position as per architectural practice. So 2D stuff shows in plan, 3D stuff not showing in plan. So Revit has the control over all of that stuff, so we can make those choices. With Windows, it's a pretty straightforward process, but with doors, of course, we need to take that door leaf and glass and ensure that the 3D geometry still appears in 3D, but is hidden in plan. So you'll see that in practice in just a few moments. So that's the step 7. So that's where we add the two-dimensional geometry as required. Now this window won't require it. So let's go over to the next page here. So we'll just talk about the different basic modeling tools that Revit provides. Okay, first of all, extrusions. Now, folks, a little note about extrusions. The view that you're in controls how the extrusion is built. And if I build an extrusion in elevation, so just observe here, I'm in an elevation view. So I go to the Create tab. So we're going to be talking about these tools on the Create tab. So first of all, extrusions. So I'm building an extrusion in an elevation view. So as a result, its outline is drawn in elevation and it extrudes horizontally. So an extrusion built in elevation extrudes horizontally. So now if I go and look at this thing in plan, there it is there. So you can see it extrudes horizontally. If I build an extrusion in plan, it extrudes vertically. So I'll go look at this in 3D now. Turn on my shading. So there's that triangular form. So you can see it gets extruded vertically, and our extrusion over here gets extruded horizontally. Although you folks can also see that there's handles on all 6 sides, 6 faces. So in terms of expanding the size of this geometry, you're not limited to the direction in which it was created. So this extrusion here, which was created in elevation, I can extrude it in its other dimensions as well. Like I can alter its size, but its original shape will still only be seen in elevation. Same goes for my triangular form here, which you can see is living in a horizontal plane. So the starting working plane defines the direction of your extrusion. So extrusions are pretty easy to conceptualize. Now I should mention, if you are in 3D, you are not limited in terms of which plane you start on. One of the important tools when you're building geometry with inside your families is found on the Create tab. Now you're like, these extrusions that we had here, why did it start from this location? Why didn't it start from somewhere else? Well, in this plan view, unbeknownst to you, there is a starting point for this extrusion. On the Create tab, find the Set Work Plane command. So this tells Revit where in this view, so in terms of the depth of this view, think about how far down into the screen that we can see. We can choose where this is extruding from. Do you folks see it says sill right now here in this dialog box? So when I hit the Set Work Plane command in the plan view, it pops up this dialog box and says it's extruding from this sill. Where is this? Where can I find this? So I'm going to cancel, and I'm going to go to my exterior elevation by double clicking on it. And you can see it here. See how it's got a name on it? It says sill. So I can start an extrusion from the level, here this level, and if I see that in the set work plane dialog box. Or I can choose one of these other planes here, provided I've given them a name. So ladies and gentlemen, this right beside the set work plane tool is the reference plane command. And once reference planes have been placed, they can be named. And so once a reference plane has been named, I can use it as a starting point for a modeling operation. So the reference plane and the set work plane tool work hand in hand. You create a reference plane, and if you name it, you can use the set work plane tool to point Revit to that reference plane to start working from that point. Now here's where I'm finally getting. In 3D, I can set the direction of my extrusion to be anywhere. Observe, create, set. So now I can choose to start from the floor line, to start from the sill line, so you can see that plane, that blue rectangle here is moving higher, or from the top, or from one of these other reference planes that I can choose. So look at that. So if I say I want to start extruding from that reference plane, that's what's happening. So remember, it was here. Can't see it. If I hit show, that is the reference plane I'm going to be working from. It's not creating a white place, is it? Well, good news. You can click on that plane once you've shown it, and you can kind of stretch it around so it's in a more useful location, so you can kind of see where you're going to be extruding from. So that is where my extrusion will start if I were to start an extrusion now, which I will. Right, so now I am starting from that reference plane, and the extrusion, as you can see, it started from that reference plane and grows out from it. Yes, sir?
Wes, how do you pick an orthographic plane such as the one on your prism set?
Right on. We're getting there. You're about 1 minute ahead of your time, sir. Yeah. So if you want to get off the grid, as it were, on the Create tab, one of the options you have with the Set Work Plane tool is not to use any of the planes that are listed here. But you can instead pick a plane of your own choice. So if you can see it, you can pick it. So if I hit pick a plane and hit OK, I can put my cursor on the face of this object and observe. See, as I put my cursor on each plane, it highlights it. So just be cautious of where you are hovering with your cursor so you can choose the plane that you want to work from. So now when I click this, because I had the show feature turned on, you can see that the working plane has now moved to the face of this extrusion. And so now if I build another extrusion, there it is. And now it is hosted by that face. So if someone were to come and modify the size of this face, so there's the triangle, the handle there to change the size of this face, you can see what's happening. This circular extrusion stays hosted to the face of this triangle as the triangle's shape were to change. Now this might look kind of fun, but it's actually undisciplined, because hosting geometry to the face of other geometry is considered a somewhat undisciplined approach to building a family and hard to control the outcome in all scenarios. So that's extrusions. Now the next tool to talk about is the sweep tool. Now I'm going to set my work plane back to the floor line. So going to create and set and switching it to the back down to the level. You'll see the show work plane has moved. So sweep, it's a two-step process. So you find it on the Create tab. Here's the sweep tool here. And so I'm on page 2 of the notes. So we've just done extrusions, and now we do sweeps. So a sweep, you've got 2 steps. You draw the path, or you sketch the path. Now, first things first, I'm going to sketch the path. So what you do is you define several segments upon which a cross-sectional profile will follow the path. So anyone who's done Follow Me in SketchUp, same idea. So here I'll just draw a series of curves. So with Revit, it's start point, end point, radius, start point, end point, radius. And Revit will automatically find the point of tangency. So I've just drawn a couple of curves here. So those pink lines that you see there are going to define the path for my sweep. So you folks can see in page 2, step 1 is to define the curve, the path for the sweep. And then we're going to draw the cross-sectional profile. Now you folks can see this green square here. That is called the profile plane. That is where I will draw the cross-sectional profile for the sweep. Now once you've got it selected, you can actually grab it and move it along to some other location along the path if you wish. Usually it doesn't matter, and you can just leave it where it is. So that's the first step. So here's my path. Now you can see the green checkbox here. This would say to Revit, I'm done with the path. We're going to move on to the profile. So I hit stop here. So now the path will turn black. And then to the right, you can see here there is edit profile. So this is where we could draw the shape that we want swept along that path. Now in the notes, you can see that we had a pentagon that was swept. Instead, this time I'm going to just draw a circle. And I'm not going to draw it right at the center. I'm going to draw it offset. So what's going to happen is that this circle is going to be swept along this path, and you can see that there's a bit of offset there between the center of the path and the circle. No big deal. Finish. And then finish again. So there's your sweep. So sweeps are the next bit here. So folks, we'll take a break for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and look at the other bits and carry on.